Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
Break free from the forces holding you back. Get the life you deserve. Eliminate stress, reduce anxiety, decrease depression, and start living your full potential. Thousands have used Dr. Foojan Zeine's awareness integration theory, an evidence-based behavioral health breakthrough with incredible life-changing results. Getting rid of past trauma, having fulfilling relationships, increasing earnings, and living their best life. Now, the Foojan app is available to everyone. The app is Dr. Foojan Zeine's awareness integration theory in the palm of your hand. Download the Foojan app today.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Inner Voice podcast, a heartfelt chat with my guests and you beautiful listeners and viewers. I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine. I'm a psychotherapist and author and the originator of the awareness integration theory, where you can find in any of the books of Life Reset, Intentional Parenting, for all of you beautiful coaches and mental health specialists and professionals, psychologists, psychotherapists. You can also find the Theory and Awareness Integration Therapy book. And I'd love to hear from you. And for everybody who wants to experience this very latest evidence-based theory and self-awareness and integration and how to create fulfillment in your life, you can also go to Foojan app in your Apple Store or Google Play and learn about not only the theory, but also work through your life in every area of your life. So it's great to be with you today, and I'm positive that you will enjoy my conversation in this episode with Elizabeth Horn as much as I did. Elizabeth Horn has been a healthcare communicator for over 20 years. And is the co-founder and co-director of the ART of Infertility, for which she has curated 30 exhibits since its inception in 2014. The ART of Infertility was the 2018 recipient of the Hope Award for Innovation given by Resolve, the National Infertility Association, for its work communicating patient experiences through the ART program. Today, we're going to talk about her latest book that she has authored, and which is Infertilities, a Curation. She has authored with Maria Novotny and Robin Silbergleid. And what they do is, in this book, is to seek to break through the silence, the shame, the stigma, the isolation surrounding trouble with conceiving and bearing a child, while also demonstrating how central creativity is to grieving and healing. Through personal stories, vignettes, poetry, and works of visual art, this collection captures the anxiety, the fear, frustration, anger, stress, sadness, familiar to every single person living with infertility, and not just older white heterosexual couples, which as a myth, it appears that, that's what it's been stated. Infertilities, a Curation, honors the experience and perspective of diversity of individuals living with infertility, women and men, white, Black, Latinx, and Asian, single parents by choice, non-binary and transgender individuals, heterosexual couples, lesbian and queer identified couples, and anyone with a medical condition that makes conceiving or bearing a child impossible. As the curators stress, and this collection makes clear, infertility does not discriminate. It was a beautiful conversation, very heartfelt, and sharing personal stories. So I hope that you enjoy. And if you've had this condition, then you are going to relate. And if you haven't, then it opens the perspective of a whole different concept that is there, and hopefully you will understand more, have compassion, and learn about it. Subscribe to my podcast, my YouTube channel, and connect with me through my website, foojanzeine.com. If you would like to go through and get the Foojan app to create fulfillment in your life, go to foojan.com and go to any of our social media by Dr. Foojan Zeine, and I'd love to hear from you. So contact me through social media, through my email, and let me know what are some of the topics that you want to hear, or be sure to subscribe to both the YouTube channel and this, and let us know. Let us know what you want to hear. So without further ado, here's Elizabeth Horn.
Eliminate stress, reduce anxiety, and decrease depression. Dr. Foojan Zeine's awareness integration theory has helped thousands like you get incredible life-changing results. The Foojan app gives you her evidence-based treatment in the palm of your hand. Download today.
Well, welcome, Elizabeth Horn, to our show. It's so nice to have you.
I'm so excited to be here.
Well, your expertise is in infidelity, and you have written the book about Infertilities with your co-authors, Maria Novotny and Robin Silbergleid. And it's a curation of a lot of amazing stories and conversations about infertility. Tell me what got you interested in this topic.
Sure. So my interest in art and infertility and creative writing and infertility really came from my own experience. I was diagnosed with infertility back in about 2010, and I was really frustrated with the way that my infertility was so invisible. There wasn't an outward sign of what I was going through. And like many individuals, it's estimated that about 61% of women in particular don't share their infertility experience or diagnosis with their friends and even close family members. So I was really feeling isolated and really wanted some way to kind of express my emotion around what I was dealing with, as well as have a physical representation of it, because infertility is so invisible.
Absolutely. It seems like the World Health Organization says statistically there's 1 in 8 couples that go through this, and now recently more about 1 in 6 people globally have some trouble getting pregnant, whether it's genetic or it's conditional, or because people wait a little bit longer before they get pregnant. So that's it's a high statistics, which people who might not be really noticing, because I think everybody who goes through this, it feels very personal, and they might feel like I'm odd or I'm different. But then when we look at the bigger picture of the statistics, and that it happens in all levels of society, all races, all kind of ages, and socioeconomic status, regardless of where you live. It's prevailing. And do you have, with your research that you've done for the book and all of it, is there a particular reasons or clusters or myths that are around this idea?
Yeah, so I think one of the big ones is age, right? We think of infertility as something that impacts older individuals or older couples. And while that's certainly true that infertility declines with age, it's not uncommon for women and men in their early 20s, for example, to also deal with infertility. So that's a big one that we wanted to kind of push back against, that myth that it only impacts older individuals and couples. Women and men, individuals of color, are often kind of excluded from what the general population sometimes thinks of as someone who has an infertility diagnosis. And actually, Black women in particular are impacted at higher rates due to things like fibroids and their uterus. So we really wanted to share information about that as well, and perspectives from individuals of color who are dealing with infertility. Another thing people don't often think of when they think of someone who's infertile is someone who's in a same-sex couple or a single parent by choice, for example. So we really wanted to share stories from a wide range of perspectives, and men too, because a lot of times men's perspectives are left out of the mix when we hear infertility stories.
Mm-hmm. Yes. There's so much emotions around this matter, because I think that for me, myself, my experience had been that I did get pregnant very early on in my marriage, and I was very young, and this was not the right time.
Mm-hmm.
also, I would, we chose not to have the child. But then after that, it kept, waiting and waiting. And at one point, I remember having a lot of difficulties getting pregnant. And at one point, I got menopause so early that doctor told me that I could no longer have a child. I remember being so shocked that going around driving, and I had aimlessly, and I had no idea where I was. And it was interesting that there's so much emotion that shows up suddenly where with this idea that, especially as a female, your body is designed to be able to do this, and then suddenly having the idea that you don't and you can't, and then you have to start looking at obviously alternatives. And for me, I did chose not to look for alternatives and accept that it is what it is, and just raise and give my love to the children who were around. But I really went firsthand into many months of experiences of the taboo conversation, that this wasn't only a personal conversation. It was very much a community, a societal conversation, and it keeps coming up, which is like, do you have children? How come you don't have, choose not to have children? And so it, because it is such a given concept, when you are in a phase of not going through what considers normal to be, then there's so much emotions and conversations that show up. Can you share a little bit with your experience and research that you've done for your book, or some of feelings, emotions, taboos, and things that show up?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that is unexpected to a lot of people who are just learning about infertility is that an infertility diagnosis has been shown via research to be as stressful as a diagnosis of other medical conditions such as heart disease or cancer or HIV positive status. And that's one of the things that, there's a lot of focus sometimes on physical treatment of infertility, but not so much those mental and emotional impacts that come up. So that definitely plays into the stress and the just the turmoil that you might be faced with. You mentioned, previously, you weren't ready to have a child and you were able to access care to be able to make that decision. And I think that's another thing that we don't often think of is infertility as a reproductive justice issue, because what we would really like to see is reproductive health in general and reproduction being a personal choice in terms of being able to have the access to your health care to have a child or not have a child at the time that you choose. So that's one of the things that we wanted to raise through this project and this book as well, is just, how reproductive health care often leaves out the conversation of infertility. And then also too, the kind of success stories that we hear a lot of times are those that end with a baby or a child. And there are a lot of success stories that don't end with a baby or a child. There are a lot of ways to find a meaningful and purposeful life and find happiness and peace and joy. And well, a lot of the stories in the book are, of course, sad, because this can be a sad topic. There are a lot of joyful stories too. So we really wanted to push back against some of those myths and those narratives of, success equals baby. And also too, just if you end up having a child or a family through and after your infertility process, infertility doesn't just end. It's not like it's over when you have a baby. There are ways that it impacts you throughout your life. I still struggle with that question. Do you have children? Often because my path to parenthood has been varied. So, I have a hard time kind of honoring all of those experiences that made me a parent. I raised my nieces for a time, and I had a miscarriage. So I was pregnant with twins at one time and had a miscarriage. And I contribute that to my feelings of motherhood or parenthood as well. And am now step parenting after infertility. So, I just really want to point that out too, is that just because you have a child or a family doesn't mean that infertility magically goes away. You still have these stress and emotional reactions to your disease.
Absolutely. I think that there is this taboo that you also talk about in your book, that it is two ways that I think society sometimes looks at it, is either you're not able, so you're incapable of, or it was your fault because you waited too long and it didn't happen. And somehow it's almost like we hold some sort of a shame or a blame around this thing, which just seems like everybody's, on a normal level, you should be able to. So if it's not, then there's either a shame or a blame. Either I'm incapable or I did something wrong. And I also work with a lot of women and men who go through this concept, and part of it is the women, but I think that even for men, I've worked a lot with when their sperm count is not there and they have to get surrogate in order to be able to do this, and they feel less than, they feel shame, they feel really like they're not the man who are able to do this. And then there's also this the emotional angle of not being good enough to do what your species is supposed to do as a normal genetic principle, and the underlying of why you're even here is supposed to procreate from your own body and out. And so I think that innately all of these things are somehow as a statement around us that we have to consistently face, and none of it is easy to face, and like you said, and none of it goes away. It's more like, okay, I can accept whatever it is, and I win some, I lose some, and that's okay. And how can I create some more winning? The same thing you were saying, that I created alternative ways of how to nourish and cherish and give my love in level of creation, and do it in a different way. And same way I did, raise the children, became a therapist to kind of reparent the world in a way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we do the different types of replacement for some of our experiences that we didn't get to have, but it just keeps showing up because of the messages that are there, that are not necessarily because people are intending bad, but just situations trigger the conversation over and over again. How did you process this, and how did it land for you to get completed with it, or even if you're not complete with it, come into the process systematically of working it through?
Yeah, so I mentioned early on that I started creating artwork around my experience, and that has been a huge, creative outlet for me, and a way for me to process different stages of dealing with infertility and undergoing certain procedures, or having a way to use that art to share my experience with my friends and my family. So my baby for a long time was really the arts organization that I started along with Maria and Robin through that process. And what we did for a long time is curate these exhibits of patient-made artwork around infertility, and use them as a tool to share information with our communities and do advocacy work, and really have a safe space for people who are dealing with infertility to meet up and share their stories and meet others. And along with those exhibits, we would do art and writing workshops and film screenings and other things. We did a lot of work sharing infertility stories in the workplace. So at places like pharmaceutical companies or clinics or therapy offices, just bringing those lived experiences of infertility into that space. And that was so healing for me to have an opportunity to not only share my own story, but make these other stories visible, and make sure that people heard them as well. So, when COVID came around and we were prohibited essentially from doing in-person events, we had already started working on the book and decided to take the time while we were home to really finish it up, to wrap it up, and kind of create a portable version of what we've been doing with the in-person exhibits for so long, just offering this piece that offered a lot of diverse perspectives and stories through visual artwork and through creative writing. And our hope is that will, be something that someone who's dealing with infertility can pick up and find themselves in and see a part of their story in, and find that they're not alone, to feel less isolated, as well as a tool for, the general public who just doesn't know anything about infertility, or friends and family members. And also that we're hopeful that it will make its way into the clinics, into the healthcare providers' offices, in terms of sharing those stories with healthcare providers, as well as the patients who are there, and medical students, and all kinds of different groups that might benefit from it. But that's a way I found so much healing throughout this time. But it is a process. I've done a lot of therapy and a lot of meditation, and a lot of just kind of reframing my mindset, and kind of rediscovering my own identity. Because, like you said earlier, you think that you're going to be able to be a parent when you're ready to be a parent. And when that doesn't happen, it can be really, jolting. You have to kind of figure out, if I'm not going to be a parent, what will my identity be? What will I do? So that's taken a lot of time, and something I still grapple with. But art has definitely helped along the way, as well as therapy and friends, and just connecting with others who are dealing with similar experiences.
Yes, absolutely. Infertilities, everyone, a curation by Elizabeth Horn and Maria Novotny and Robin Silbergleid. Elizabeth, there's a concept in your book that you really talk about, more of promoting this conversation of infertility as a biomedical conversation versus societal conversation, versus a blame shame version of it, where it is put upon people that they must have done something to, whether it's a man or women, they must have done something to their body, or there's always some accusation of that, whether it's coming from the person themselves or outside. So sometimes we just do take all the societal conversations and interject it and blame ourselves for it. But as I see in your book, you're looking at bringing it into the medical world, so we could take the shame and blame burden off of it, and really look at what it is that's not working, and what are the possibilities of for people to be able to create something, whether it's go into different medical possibilities for themselves, or at least come to some closure, even if those medical possibilities are not there. So can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the Americans with Disabilities Act actually recognizes infertility as a disability, and I think that's important to realize as well, and recognize. Most people in the United States don't have access to coverage for their health care when it comes to infertility. So a lot of people who are diagnosed are, kind of burdened with this out-of-pocket expense for their infertility, when it is a medical condition and a disease, just like other conditions and diseases that people have coverage for. So that was one of the things we wanted to point out in terms of a biomedical condition, just that this is like other medical diseases that deserve that kind of attention and that kind of coverage. Also, in terms of societal too, we think we have many people who are unable to have a child just because they're lacking a sperm or an egg because they're a single parent by choice or in a same-sex couple. So we also wanted to share that. And many times individuals who don't have access to sperm or egg or womb are, so for example, there's a story in our book about a lesbian couple who are automatically labeled as having male factor infertility, even though really that's not the case. I mean, they don't have access to sperm, but they just need help in that way. But because of that reason too, a lot of individuals who are single parents by choice or in a same-sex couple don't always get the testing that they need, because it's just kind of assumed that the reason they aren't able to have a baby too is just, needing access to that sperm or egg, when sometimes actually testing things out and checking things like hormone levels or other factors that contribute to infertility, blocked tubes or something like that, although that's not so much a factor in IVF, but in intrauterine insemination, it can be. So just really looking at the whole picture and seeing that this is both a medical issue as well as a societal one.
It certainly is. It seems like, I think sometimes because of the natural expectation of, well, this should just be part of the regular growth, that people don't necessarily go in and check until the time that they're trying in order to have children. It's like that conversation doesn't show up. It's almost like, we'll cross the bridge when we have to.
Right.
And then suddenly they're ready to have the child, and then the obstacles show up, and then now they have to do all the tests and go through all of it, and then because they're ready to have something, then postponing this because of realization of something is happening biomedically then becomes more shocking. But what I'm hearing from you and in this book is more about taking that part of our life seriously, doing all the diagnostics that we need to do, talk to the physicians that we need to do in order to get ourselves prepared to see if there is something that we need to handle about our body, or their support and supplements or different matters that we need to bring as a resource to our lives in order to get us ready for the phase of life as we show up, because becoming a parent is a phase of life. So we don't need to wait until the last minute. We can get prepared for that phase of life. And
Sorry.
That's okay. But that also leads to what you were talking about as getting prepared for that phase of life for single women who decide to stay, single mother. Then they're not attaching having children with marriage necessarily, or the LGBTQ plus community, which ultimately has to have some different type of planning and support and resources.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we've tried to do along the way is do some education with college students, because I think college students are often left out of the equation. Like you said, you don't often have those conversations with your doctor about reproduction unless it's to avoid pregnancy, until you're ready to do it. So just making them aware. We do that through a workshop we call Reproductive Rights, WRITES, and really kind of bring this concept of infertility as a reproductive justice issue into the classroom, start to introduce them to the idea that this is something that they just want to have on their radar. You don't have to necessarily do anything about it right away, but just being aware that there are ways that you can prepare for that and test, some basic blood levels or hormone levels or other things that might give you a little insight to if you might, have a little bit of trouble later on in terms of, how many eggs you might have left at your age. Is it kind of the standard for someone your age? Is it less than someone your age should typically have? So those are some things that we can kind of address ahead of time to have more knowledge when we reach that point when we're actually ready to move forward and try to get pregnant.
Yes. also in your book talk about racial health and how these experiences get complicated and for depending on what race you are. Can you share a little bit about the research you've done on that?
Yeah, so I mentioned a little bit earlier about, Black women in particular have a higher rate of fibroids, for example. So that those fibroids grow inside the uterus and can impact an embryo implanting. So they can adversely impact a person's ability to become pregnant. So that's one of the barriers, just basic physical barriers, but there can be, Black and brown women on average seek help a bit later and actually have access to care later. And some of that's just kind of reflected in healthcare providers, right? We're more comfortable sometimes seeing a healthcare provider that is like us or who might we feel take us more seriously, and that sometimes isn't as accessible to women who are women of color. So that can impact, there can be socioeconomic issues, of course, regardless of race, in terms of, as I mentioned before, people just not having access to the healthcare they need. And, who has just, some people do have access to the kinds of funds that they need just kind of laying around and ready to go if they're faced with infertility, but treatment itself can be a huge out-of-pocket expense. And IVF, can range tens of thousands of dollars. If you need access to surrogacy or something like that, it could be upward of $50,000 to $100,000. And even adoption, people think of like, oh, the whole myth of why don't you just adopt? There are plenty of kids out there who needs homes, but if adoption has all kinds of barriers and a lot of agencies, for example, don't work with couples who are of specific religious faiths, or might not work with single parents or those who are in a same-sex relationship. So there can be a lot of barriers to that as well. So we really wanted to highlight those stories and share both the similarities and the differences. And that's why the book's entitled Infertilities, because there's not just one infertility story, right? Or one diagnosis. It's so nuanced, and there can be so many layers. So we wanted to share that through the art and stories in the book as well.
Absolutely. Yes. I think that I work with a lot of clients who are go through the cycle of the IVF, and you could see the hormonal changes that happens that really affects the couple. And then, the implantation and moving forward, and, the disappointment sometimes that it doesn't take, and they have to go through over and over, and the expenditure to go through and, to finally have the success that they have. Or sometimes they go through all of it and it just doesn't work out, and they have to go through and the grief of all of that happens. And you share your own story, and there's a lot of grief that happens every time that we have an expectation, it doesn't come through, or we lose a child because in the first trimester you might have to, so you have to go through a lot of grief. There's a lot of psychological factors, emotional factors around infertility that people really need to be aware of, and to work on it in order for them to be able to grieve appropriately and not make that the concept of their identity and just label themselves as something, and be able to move forward and create different types of success, that only having your own child with your own egg and sperm is not the only way that you could feel successful as someone who is a parent. That you shared yourself in how you've parented others. I've shared those. So although it might not be the original experience, but we don't also have to just sit in a space of I can't and I couldn't, but we could definitely look at I can in so many other ways. So many of the stories in your book also handle how to be successful in this. Part of the success is prevention, or preparation, or planning, and all of it. But other ways of success is looking at different angles of this and landing success for yourself, and however you could bring that meaningful state to it. Can you share a little bit about that area?
Yeah, so the way we set up the book is in 3 parts. And the first part is really much about kind of that identity piece, kind of finding out you're dealing with infertility or starting out ready to have a child and coming across these barriers. So we share many stories of that kind of basic setting out, coming to just find out there's an issue, working through those emotions and processing how relationships are impacted throughout that time. So in that first part, that's a lot of the focus. And then the second part deals a lot with, kind of going through initial stages of treatment, or accessing adoption for the first time and what that looks like, and working through those struggles. And the third part really talks a lot about resolution, right? So resolution for some people will be, successful IVF, for example. Some people might find resolution through third-party reproduction with use of donor egg or donor sperm or donor embryo. Some people might have a successful adoption story, and others are going to either choose child-free. So it sounds like that was your choice in terms of accepting that and finding a way to find meaning and move forward with that option. Some people feel like that's not a decision they make, and that's kind of forced upon them, and have a little bit, sometimes, not that one way is harder than the other, but just see it in a different way. It's just a little bit of a different perspective. So in that section, we also wanted to touch again on just that pushing back on that narrative of success, that success can look very different for many different people, and there's not one right or wrong way to resolve or to end, so to speak, your infertility journey. And also that it doesn't just go away. It's going to continue throughout your life as you reach different stages. When your friends are all of grandparent age and having grandbabies or whatever that might be. So just sharing those perspectives and hopefully normalizing them, that there are many different ways to find a resolution and kind of end your story, even though it's not truly an ending.
It's so important what you said, because I think that because in every single phase of life, that conversation shows up, and even it shows up, have had children by other means. There's a part of that person that might still hold to the concept of why couldn't I have, or the experience might be different, or their attachment might be different. So because this conversation continues throughout the phase of life, it's so important to get clear with it, to let go of the energy, excess energy that might be there, that could be blaming or shaming, and to become clear with whatever it is, because you're absolutely right that it keeps showing up in front of you. And if you don't want to have a lot of excess emotional uproar every time that it comes, then it's so important for us to, kind of wrap our head and heart around it and come to some the source of purpose and meaning into it that feels right to us. Because every time it shows up, we can go back to that sense of meaning and the beauty that whatever it is that we decided to do and create success for it. In 1 minute or so, is there anything we haven't shared that you really want people to know about you, about your own experience, about what you've learned and researched, about the book?
I would say, and I don't really like the word journey so much, but it really can be a longer kind of road than you expect going in. And one of the things that I've found helpful throughout what I'm dealing with is just kind of to do the most aggressive thing I'm ready to at the time, and also to take your time and really I was not so fond of the idea of IVF. Not that anyone wants to do IVF, but I was really feeling like that wasn't an option for me and not something I wanted to do. And I just took the time to explore that through therapy and really think about the pros and cons and what I ultimately wanted, and did it at a time that was right for me. I think, we've talked a lot about societal pressures throughout this time, and just really doing what's right for you and for your family, and trying to push aside some of those outside voices, because what really is important is that we do what's right for us in terms of family building.
Absolutely. Yes. You're absolutely accurate about how to own our choices, or whatever conditions they are, and work it through and make the best possible way in our life with whatever it is, whether, again, it was choices or it was conditions that are just there for us to face. Everyone, Infertilities, a Curation by and edited by Elizabeth Horn, Maria Novotny, and Robin Silbergleid. Elizabeth, where can people find you and your books?
Yeah, so we do have a website for the Art of Infertility, which is my arts organization, artofinfertility.org. We do have a dedicated page for the book and for all of the events that are kind of springing up from the book. So you can find out where we're going to be. We have a variety of virtual and in-person events listed. And that's a good place to start. Wayne State University Press is our publisher, and you can find access to them as well. And the book is available in your favorite local bookstore.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And for all of you who are out there, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you. And until next week, bye-bye.
Eliminate stress, reduce anxiety, and decrease depression. Dr. Foojan Zeine's awareness integration theory has helped thousands like you get incredible life-changing results. The Foojan app gives you her evidence-based treatment in the palm of your hand. Download today.